tomorrow, I suppose.
If it's convenient, sir.
It's not convenient. It's not fair. If I was to deduct £5 for your taking the day off, you'd think yourself ill-used, I'll be bound. But you don't think me ill-used when I pay a day's wages for no work.
It's only once a year, sir.
Fine excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. I suppose you must have the whole day. You'll be here all the earlier the next morning.
Yes, sir. Mary...
You were about to say something, Cratchit.
Nothing, sir.
Wow, what a Scrooge. So welcome again, and I want to start the sermon by simply apologizing to the folks. We have this congregation, and then we have the other congregation. The folks, we have a regular set of people that become a part of our worshiping congregation every week online. And some of them live a distance. Some of them go to church elsewhere, and then afterwards they get home and they get out their devices and they go to church a second time with us. Some of them can't get to church. And so last week we had these incredibly serious issues, and I thought the world was coming to an end because I could not get anything to work. And we ended up not being able to push our worship service out online. And so I apologize to you for that. We did get a piece of it on video, but it's really shaky video off of a camera. So if you've not heard the sermon, you're going to have to listen carefully. You can go on YouTube, and I'd like you to do that because these sermons in the month of December kind of all string together one after the next. So go listen. You're going to have to listen a little more carefully, a little more closely, because it's not the audio that you're used to. But it's certainly worth listening to, and for you as well. Let me tell you what happened. On Monday, I came back and we talked to our tech people in Idaho, and we explained the problem, and they said, well, let us look at it. And after a while, I got a phone call, and he said, we got it worked out. We know what it is. And I said, what is it? He said, well, your hard drive on your computer, which, by the way, if you know anything about computers, it's a 2 terabyte hard drive. They told me I would never run out of room. Of course, they hadn't figured on me not erasing anything. And so we have every clip of video that we have shot in this room since March on that drive, and it just filled up, and there was no more place to put anything. So when we went to go do that on Sunday, it just said, sorry, can no do. The computer said that to us. I didn't read the tea leaves well enough. And then, of course, the tech guy by the name of Brian, he's wonderful. He said, I tried to leave you a voice message on your phone, but your voicemail is full. Oh, my. I guess I have a few things to learn, don't I? So that was, the video clip was from one of the 26 film renderings of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. And this one happens to come from 1999. That was Patrick Stewart. And if you felt like you were on the Starship Enterprise, there's a reason for that. That's the same actor that plays Captain Picard on the Enterprise. It's not the only reason I like this particular version of it. But Scrooge is, and by the way, let me just back up here again. I'm sorry, I try to put things in the right order here. So we have this sermon series that we're working on, and we're talking about vision. And so we opened it up 2 weeks ago, and last week we talked about vision for ourselves. And this week I want to talk about your vision for the people that you live with, and especially your families. And to do that, I'd just like you to say something with me. So just repeat after me. What's big is really small.
What's big is really small.
And what's small is everything.
What's small is everything.
Okay, can you remember that? That's important. Because in every single rendering of this movie, The Christmas Carol, is really, what you really have is you have two different visions of the way life ought to be. And you start with one and you end with another. And that's what Scrooge is doing throughout this entire movie, Ebenezer Scrooge. He starts with one vision. And it begins, at least in this movie, with Scrooge burying his partner, Jacob Marley, 7 years before the fateful night on Christmas Eve. And he's burying his partner, and he raises his glass in a toast, and he says to his partner, we have built this firm together, and I promise you, Jacob, that I will see it through to a success. And for Scrooge, that becomes his everything. It already is his everything even then, but even more so. That is his vision for life, making money, seeing to it that the business is a success, and the only thing that matters is the business. So much so that as time goes on, he becomes a bitter man. And he's given up on sharing that vision with others. He, in fact, sees them as nothing but fools. And why would you pick a man's pocket every 25th of December? Fine excuse for this. He just cannot see it. Everyone else is a fool, and he has gone into himself. Then, of course, there's the second vision at the end of the movie, where he is this generous man, generous beyond measure. And as Dickens himself writes, he is the finest friend and master and man that the old city has ever seen. And there's this complete transformation, and of course, in between is this journey from one vision to the next, led by three spirits. You know the story well. And each of these spirits take him through and help him see another way, a deeper truth, far deeper than anything else he has ever imagined, because for him, the only thing that matters is what's right before him. And these three spirits, past, present, and future, take him through to show him a different way. So that by the time we get to the end of the movie, he's a completely changed man. And in fact, the last scene of the movie, some of you know this, he's at the grave, and he's looking down at his own grave. He's just wiped the stone clean, and he sees that it is his name. And in this particular rendering of the movie, the earth shakes, and the grave cracks open. And there at the bottom of the grave is an open casket. And then the earth shakes underneath his feet, and he falls into the casket, and he is face to face with his dead body. Literally face to face. And you know, that death is almost at that point like a doorway and a portal. He's leaving an old life behind, and he's moving to a new life. Because, as we know, very often when it comes to vision in life, say it with me, big things look small, big things are small, and small things are everything. Okay, I'd like you to hold that thought, and let's sing. Okay, you heard the lesson that Larry just read to us. It's chapter 35 of Isaiah, and it's this incredibly hopeful passage about flowers blooming in the desert, and the hot sand, the hot sand becoming pools of water, and the deaf hear, the lame leap for joy, the blind can see, and there is this highway, this green strip that runs through the desert to go from one place to the next, to go from this life to another life and another world. And there is only one problem with this lesson. It simply doesn't fit where it's located, chapter 35. Because during this time period, now the time period is this. We've been talking about King Ahaz, right, last couple of weeks. Well, Ahaz is gone. Hezekiah, his son, has come into power. And Hezekiah is a much better king than Ahaz, but he has to live with all of his father's mistakes. And this is a dark time in Israel. And what's more is it's going to get even worse. In the next 100 or so years, things are going to completely fall apart. The wheels for God's people are going to fall off. And they're going to be destroyed as a people completely. And so if you take a look, when you get home, take a look at Isaiah 34 and then compare it with 35 because it's like polar opposites, completely different. And then you take 35 and compare it with 6. Once again, polar opposites, completely different. You have this message of hope in this otherwise dark time, and it just doesn't fit. So much so that most Bible scholars I read, they say, well, whoever finally put Isaiah together after it was all said and done, they probably missed it here. And I know it's in this order, but really 35 ought to be later in the book of Isaiah when Isaiah is prophesying about a time 150 years later, a much more hopeful time. And that's what they think. They think it doesn't belong there. I disagree completely and totally. I think it belongs there. I think it's there for a purpose. And I think that message was meant for God's people at that time, in this dark time. They needed that message then. And Isaiah provided it for them. Small as it is in this hopeless place. And I thought about that as I thought about what I would say to you today. Especially as we talk about vision for our families. Because really what you have is in Isaiah 35, you have two visions. You have a vision of hopelessness and a vision of hope and promise. A green strip through the desert. Shirley, would you put that picture up for me? I want to tell you about something that's very close to my heart. This is a picture of the Grindberg family 2 generations before me. It was taken, we think about 1909, 1910, and the woman in the middle, that is my great-grandmother. Her name is Pollyanna, and those are her 8 children. And the reason I think it's 1909, 1910, because Carl, right next to Pollyanna, that's my great-uncle. He looks like he's about 10, maybe 11, 12 years old. And the guy in the middle, in the back row, third from the left, third from the right, that's my great-grandfather. And he cannot deny me, can he? Yeah. and so there are 2 things that are really sort of stick out to me in this picture. The first one is this. My great-grandfather, Christian, is not in the picture. That is because 11, 12 years before the picture's taken, he passed away. It was a couple of days before Christmas in 1898. A couple days after Christmas, and he suddenly died. Now, I want you to think about this. Pollyanna has 8 children at the time. The oldest, Tom, is 15. The youngest, Carl, at the time of Christian's death, is 8 months old. My grandfather was 2.5. And they have come just a few years earlier from Norway to the United States. She can barely speak English. And the only breadwinner in the house, she is burying a few days after Christmas. It is a dark time. How in the world does she feed 8 children? That leads me to the second thing that just all of the last couple of years has jumped out at me about this picture. I've been looking at this picture all my life. Never really noticed it. look at what's in her hand. I didn't notice the Bible there until just a couple of years ago when I ran across the transcript from Uncle Carl, the one sitting next to her, the youngest one. And he did for the Sioux City Museum an oral history, which got transcribed. And he talked about being raised in Sioux City, and especially his experience in the Grindberg family. And throughout this entire 30-page transcript, time and time and time again, he talks about the faith as being the thing that the entire family centered around. Tom, the 15-year-old, quit school and went to work. He became a clerk at a place called Tullerton Warfield. He later became the president of that company. They had a milk cow on Leach Street and a bunch of chickens. And so one of the ways that they made money was to take the eggs and sell them. And the faith was always there. All throughout Carl's recounting, the faith is always there. And then Pollyanna had something called Sunday eggs. So any leg that was laid on a Sunday, she took it and she sold it. And she gave the money to missions. She has no idea how she's going to feed her family. She's living in a foreign place. She can barely speak the language. And look at them. Look into their eyes. Look at the clothes they're wearing. Because you see, of all the things that she gave them, not just their life, not just food to eat, not just clothes on her back, not just a house, a roof to live under. Of all the things that she gave them this green carpet through the desert. This vision that there is something more than the eye can see and the ear can hear, and that something will sustain us when nothing else can. And it was their guide, and it was their foundation for life together. Where did she get it? More than likely her parents in Norway. And she gave it to them, and they gave it to their children, and one of their children gave it to me, and I gave it to my children, and now my children, Pollyanna couldn't possibly know this, although I know she's watching in heaven. Now my children are passing along that green carpet through the desert, that royal highway, to her great, great, great grandchildren. Now that's a vision worth living for, worth sinking your life into. Let's sing. So we've been talking about vision the last few weeks. We'll continue to up until Christmas time. And the question that I've been asking all December, and the question I want to again ask you today is, what is your vision? What is the point on the horizon that you set your life on. And especially now as you think about the people that you live with, the people you do life with, and especially your families, what's your vision for them? And this is where it gets a little slippery, because there are lots of things that are great things to be and do for your family. I mean, you can give them food and clothing and a roof over their heads. I think that's a great thing to do. You can give them yourself. You give them your time. You give them opportunities so they can explore the world and they can be their own person. All of these things are fabulous ways to invest in your family. And I encourage you to do that. Just so long as I said a couple of weeks ago, just so long as those things are not the thing. I mean, everybody wants to put their family first, and that is noble and that is right. However, let me say this. The only way you can really put your family first is if they are not first. There has to be something higher and deeper and wider than that. Because that thing that is higher and deeper and wider is the foundation for everything else. And if the foundation isn't there, as Jesus said, the wise man built his house upon the rock, and the rains came, and the winds blew, and the house on the rock stood fast. Everything else is sinking sand. Build there for them. If you want to make them first, they can't be first. And it starts with you. And let me tell you, when it comes to your kids, you can't fake this, because they'll see right through it. They will see what's important to you, and it will become important to them. They will see what drives you and makes you tick, and it will be what drives them and makes them tick. You can't fake this. It starts with you. And yes, it's a journey. Because most of us, either we don't have that vision in the first place, or else, if you're like me so often, you forget that that point on the horizon is the most important point. And so it's a journey that requires, like Scrooge, transformation. Seeing things as they are, not as you think they are, but as they are. For the Father in heaven has come to this earth through Jesus Christ, our Savior, our Lord, to create for you a place and a purpose for your life, and a vision for you to live this entire life for Him, serving those that He has given to you as a gift. Hold on to that vision. Let God's Spirit work in you and through you. Let Him transform your life so that you can be to those that you love what God fully intends you to be. And you can give them a gift that is not just for the days you are here on the earth or the days they are here on this earth, but a gift and a foundation that will last for eternity. And for that, we give God thanks and praise.